friends, Dave Kirkpatrick here. This is November and Beyond. We're just rocking it sort of live down and dirty here in the studio here on Marlborough Street in Keene. This is just going to be the classic version of the talk show here. And I'm in studio today with a friend and colleague, Joy TMR. We work together on local issues here in Keene. We touch base on political things here and there. He's a member of several organizations and is doing a lot of good work in this town. And I think just without further ado, we'll just get the conversation started and talk a little bit amongst ourselves. So welcome, Joy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me. And just a correction, I go by they, them pronouns, gender non-binary. So just wanted to put that out there, but yeah, thanks again for having me, and thank you to our sponsors, Hannaford Seltzer.
Hannaford Seltzer. Unwilling sponsors, but hey, that's kind of the way it goes sometimes. I was hoping, maybe we'd start out this segment with you telling me a little bit about what you do. I know you from PSL, Party of Socialism and Liberation, a lot of the work you do there, and there's some other organizations as well that we connect in, but if you could tell me maybe a little bit about that, maybe a start.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good place to begin.
Sure. Well, I mean, first I'll start off, I've been in Keene for about 3.5 years now. I moved out here to work in mental health peer support. I had formerly worked at Connections Peer Support in Portsmouth, and then moved to the Keene Monadnock Peer Support Agency to run their peer respite program, and then worked at Phoenix House for a little bit, and now I deliver pizza. In that time, I became more and more radicalized as the world around me fell apart, and I saw the kind of flaws of the nonprofit system and trying to, as everyone says, change the system from within. And so I got involved with, going to protests and going to all sorts of actions, anything I could find really, Zoom meetings, etc., getting on different planning groups, helping to set up a peer advocacy group in New Hampshire, though I've left that at this point. But yeah, I got involved with the Party for Socialism and Liberation a little over a year ago now. There was a eviction defense at what's called the Bucket in Manchester, and I made contact with them there. I also do I do work with the mutual aid community in Keene, so there's Keene Mutual Aid, and we set up a table every Saturday from 2 to 3:30, make sure that people can get the needs that everyone requires to get by, like food, medicine, clothes. We provide tents if we can, books, pretty much you name it, we try to get it. But it's so the idea behind mutual aid is to try and provide for our community by ourselves, through the mutual exchange between people. So we give our time as volunteers, so others can, take and give at their need and create a space for community. I've also been involved in New Hampshire Youth Movement's Keene Hub and some actions out here, and helping to organize that, although that hub is kind of in the mix right now. I don't really know what's going on right there. But yeah, my main focus is the Party for Socialism and Liberation and organizing a working class revolutionary movement in New Hampshire.
That's awesome. That's really amazing. And I know when we talk about socialism, there are people who are going to just out of hand just have a fit. So let's soften them up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Keene Mutual Aid. Because that's a wonderful thing, and you guys are really out there helping the folks who need it most, and helping hands-on, right down where the people need the help. That's been an amazing thing to just see you folks show up over and over, where others are. Well, they're forming committees. They're talking about it. They're wishing they could do things, and not a whole lot is going on. particularly, our houseless, homeless situation here in Keene. I know you guys did a lot of work with the recent sweeps that they had here in Keene. They were throwing people out of their only homes in the towns that they live in, and the town they live in. And that hasn't been a very nice thing. You guys have been really all over it. What's the latest? What's been going on? So there was they did the sweeps. We protected the folks for a while. I think things have changed since then. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, it seems like a lot has gotten a little bit better. There's a ton of work to do. So Keene Mutual Aid and PSL, or Party for Social Liberation, Southern New Hampshire, and just to be clear, KMA, or Keene Mutual Aid. So yeah, we've been putting work into eviction defenses, as well as raising awareness in our community about the people that live behind. First it was Hannaford's, then it's Kohl's and Aldi. And these are sort of like perennial places where people go because they're just under capitalism, where you don't have a system that treats housing as a human right. People will be unhoused. People will be unable to access the resources that, the meager resources that are actually provided, such as homeless shelters and, the wait lists for housing. So we've done a lot to try and pressure the city to do something about it. Amongst those things, like I said, we did actions to actually try and prevent evictions. Those at least bought time for people in the community to move on to the next place, and also lowered the risk whilst that was happening. Some other things that we did was to hold a protest in Central Square where we had a camp out night. Although the police did come at the end of the night and asked us to move on, which we did because we didn't see the point in us getting arrested for that. Arrests, I don't know if people know this in the outside of the organizing scene, but funding arrest type protests is very difficult, and it's hard to sustain, especially with the small groups that compose a lot of New Hampshire's more radical left organizing scene. So despite that, we were able to get a lot of attention on these issues, and that led to Councilor Bobby Williams, Workman, and Lake, and pardon me because I'm forgetting their first names right now. But they wrote a proposal which was presented to City Council in the Budgetary Committee, I believe, and that was to designate campsites for our unhoused community, as well as latrines and dumpster for them to use. One of the biggest issues that the city and the people that complain about, people just living, is all the trash, and it's tough to look at, and I don't want my kids to see this. Which I suppose is understandable to a degree, but that's kind of behind that is the fact that they're not allowed to use the dumpsters at like Hannaford's or Kohl's and Aldi. I think the community back behind where they are now, because I'm not going to say where they are now on a live stream, they've been able to kind of start organizing themselves more, and have been really taking an effort to clean out the space. But the problem still exists. They can't put their trash just anywhere. Thankfully, they've been able to kind of make an agreement with the people that have some dumpsters. But the problem is these things can change in a second, and what precipitated the evictions at Hannaford was that the property owner because it was not Hannaford, the property behind Hannaford was owned for a long time by a land trust, but one of the main people behind it gave up the property to his daughter. I can't remember if he passed away or became sort of incapable of managing it, but that quick change, that precarity, changed the life of 14 people within the course of a month. So, currently where it stands is that proposal passed the committee, or the council, and what was created was an ad hoc committee by the mayor,
I remember that, yep.
which is still meeting monthly. We're really encouraging people to attend that meeting. Just if you believe that like our unhoused neighbors deserve a place to be.
Yeah, simply a place to exist, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
They want them to move along, but there's no other place to go. Do you feel that committee is making progress, or is
They're kicking the can down the road. I mean, the first thing that came up immediately when the committee first met was a 14-year-long project to get a dog park in Wheelock Park, I believe.
That's in the news today. They're dominating the news is like, we're ready to go with this
Yeah.
dog park, and I believe it's disc golf, both of which I'm a huge fan of. I think that's wonderful, but
Yeah.
like, man, that's
Hey.
what we're ready to go on, you know?
Of course. I love dogs and I love Frisbee. I've not really played disc golf.
Frisbee, disc golf, please, let's be
know.
polite here.
But I do take the lives of human beings more seriously than recreation. I think recreation is important to every society, but we can't really be serious about that if we're letting people die out in the woods.
Yeah, and letting that take priority, and I mean, of course, there's the popular support piece. It is sometimes hard to love our neighbors when in the situations they're in and when they're very different from us. But yeah, it's alarming that, I don't know, that just kind of fades off the radar, and we are very excited to get these new projects going for
Yeah.
people who already have pretty much what they need.
Well, and really at the end of the day, these projects that benefit our unhoused or impoverished neighbors or anybody that's struggling aren't profitable. They're funded through nonprofit projects. They require a capitalist philanthropy to exist. But at the end of the day, especially in times like this where the economy is not doing well and the state is trying to find where to cut programs, those are the first things to go. And they were never robust in this state. I mean, right now, I can't tell you how many people I've met whilst working in the mental health world, recovery world, and now doing what I do, that will say, oh yeah, I'm on a housing waiting list. And I'll say, oh, when do you think that'll happen? Oh, 8 years, 5 years, 6 years. Sometimes it's rushed and they get in an unexpectedly short amount of time, which is usually like maybe a year. And then because of the means testing, the turnover rate is wild. If these are people that are struggling with addiction, it is very likely they'll be back out on the street in a month. I've seen it happen over and over. And I'm sure if you talk to anybody that works in the field, they might have a lot of opinions about why it happens, but the fact is that it does happen, and I think that's a very serious problem that we need to take care of in this country.
Absolutely. It's just so unfortunate, and I went out there to the camps and met folks and, heard their stories, and then heard them comparing their stories to different people in a similar situation. And they're as diverse as the rest of us. There are families who have problems with people who have substance issues. There are people who don't like each other who can't really hang out in the same space. There are curfews and requirements and like these things that even when we're giving them what we would like to be able to offer and what some folks think is enough or hey, we're doing something, it just often doesn't fit everybody's needs. And we know those folks, they don't go away. You shoo them away, and they still have that problem somewhere else. And that's a pretty heartless way to feel satisfied about having taken care of the business.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that, one of the main ways that this problem keeps being kicked down the road is because it's all about making sure it's not visible to people. I've heard multiple times that the police don't like to go out and evict them, but their job is to protect private property. I mean, the Supreme Court said so. They're not even required to protect us in the case of a violent assault. The police aren't there to protect us, but they are there to protect property. So they have to cart themselves out there and go bother a bunch of people that they know they could go out there and talk to.
Yeah. And they'll have to deal with the problem wherever it moves to, too. You know, it's not.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so.
Within
police-
a couple of months, they'll
Yeah.
do it again, you know, and it's really a senseless waste of money. You know, when the negligible amount of money that would be required to get a dumpster that was taken out biweekly in a couple places around town. Right now, I'll tell you where they're at. They've started to organize themselves. You know, they've started to form like. Well, for one, they've expressed interest in coming. Like, folks down there want to come to the meetings that our group is holding, because while there's also this ad hoc committee that meets, there's a small group of organizers in Keene that are meeting to discuss what can we do as a community to build more of a citizen's power that is able to like put the pressure on and build different options, you know, and use that actual like mass power that, you know, is so lacking in our conception of politics in this country.
Yeah.
We kind of leave everything up to the people that in most cases we're not even voting for. You know, the majority of people don't vote for city council. The majority of people don't vote in general, especially in like these small town races that happen. You know, our city manager is an unelected position. So like what we're trying to do is actually build a citizens group that is helping to actually like form a basis of demands, basis of decision making, and a basis of power. And so folks where they're at, they've been expressing interest in coming to that, you know, because they're savvy, they can use Zoom, they have all the tools they need. I mean, I've had so many conversations with folks out there that are 10 times as resourceful than any person you'll meet on the street.
They really do what they need to do to get by. And
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I heard and learned in working with folks and in visiting those camps. And, you know, when we talked about the things that they need, you folks were delivering to them the things that they really needed to survive. And, you know, those were tools, those were survival tools. They needed, you know, duct tape, and they needed zip ties, and they needed trash bags and sanitation, and like they really are, like they're trying to do the very best they can for themselves. And it's I don't know, it's kind of heartbreaking to think of how little they have and how little they have been able to put together, but they're still making it work, and then to have somebody come and just turn that upside down on them.
Of course, I mean, because they're a part of our community. They're a diversity of people, and the tendency is to look at unhoused people as like one big group with all this one sort of attitude and identity. You know, like a lazy.
We met women who left their abusers.
Oh, yeah.
We met people who used to be teachers, educators.
Yep.
You know, regular folks. We would go to, when I worked by the library, there were folks, you know, with their kids. And
Yep.
these are people who, you know, when summertime rolls around and they close up 100 nights and they start, you know, reducing these services, those people don't disappear. They don't magically find homes, or just, like, they're still turned out, and you know, it's, we say it a lot, but all of us, most of us, are just a couple of paychecks or just a couple of accidents away from being there ourselves. And yeah, it makes me think that we really ought to do better for our fellow man, and try to see ourselves more as we're way closer to them than we are to the Bezoses and the.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out that, you know, like 10% of people own businesses or property, you know, and when I say own property, I don't mean own your house. I mean, you own a business that generates profit. Your house doesn't generate profit. You know, like your toothbrush doesn't generate profit. That's your personal property. But 10% of our society owns private property, you know, and the rest of us, they get to decide how to distribute what, you know, we create and decide what we create in the first place. I mean, we don't, like, the thing is, it's like, we create houses not for housing people, we create them to sell them. We don't create food to feed people, we create it to sell it. We don't create clothes to clothe people, we create it to sell it. And so, like, I mean, that, until we finally fix that contradiction, in society, and move past a profit-driven system, we're never gonna solve this issue. And, especially as our imperial, position in the world begins to crumble, I mean, it's happening more and more on all of the fringes, it is fraying. And as that happens, and you've got climate change barreling down on us, I mean, what was it? It was like 10,000 cattle were, died alone in the last week, just in one state. I mean, I'm sure the numbers are much bigger than that, but you had 15, I can't remember the numbers, but there was a large number of people that died in Europe just in one day, just in the UK, the highest recorded temperatures ever. In New Hampshire is warming faster than any of the states in New England.
Yeah, and you know what, one of my great fears is that we are, not going to step up to help ourselves and each other any more than we do in any other situation. We're watching what's going on in Ukraine, right? We're watching just cities being wiped off the map. We're just unbelievable devastation. The death numbers are just staggering. And we're kind of sitting here in this country, and we're saying, oh, that's terrible, but, hey, stuff happens, and what can I do about that? And we go about our business. And we're going to start doing that same thing with, Texas. It's like, well, a lot of deaths in Texas. And, if you're not from Texas, you're like, well, hey, stuff happens, and then it's going to happen in California. Then we're going to have there's going to be weather events out here on the East Coast, and if we take the same approach to each other that we take to, watching other disasters unfold, it'll just start happening, and we'll just start to accept it. And that's just the worst thing in my mind, is to accept the fact that we're just being wiped out, and, hey, what are you gonna do? We all gotta go to work.
Yeah, no, I hear that point. I think, one of the things is that a lot of people accept that, especially in the United States. That's a pretty a unique position of our sort of Western chauvinism. The rest of the world doesn't really feel that way. People do have that's just how it is, because they've been living under, colonialism, imperialism, fascism that we support in order to, enforce our imperialist rule across the world. And that creates a comfortable life for a lot of people in this country. And so it's easier for them to say, oh, well, just happens. But as it starts happening here more, I think people are waking up, and we saw that. We've been seeing it. We've been seeing it since the financial collapse of 2008. I mean, Occupy happened immediately after. That was a reaction specifically to that. And of course, you had the forces of reactionary thinking, right-wing reactionary movements popping up in response to a rising left. And you've seen that over and over again. It's intensifying as we go down the line. 2020, the movement for Black Lives, I mean, that was one of the, if not the biggest, protest movement. It was 1 in 10 U.S. citizens participated in a protest during that, for Black Lives Matter. And we're moving so fast because we think this thing, that really has trapped a lot of our attention. Not to say that social media or the access to information is a bad thing, but we're being kind of put through such a rapid response sort of thing that it kind of drowns everything out. But as our pocketbooks get smaller, as the pressures rise, as they just released the numbers today, or the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, they're going to raise inflation 75%, or 75 points. And that's the second time that they've done that in this year. And that's the only time that's ever happened in history. Now, that's going to, what inflation does when it rises is that it means that people are going to be losing jobs. You look at the 1930s, Like, the only reason the New Deal happened, for example, is because, like, there was a strong union movement, there was a strong socialist movement, there was a strong communist movement, and they all were taking a lot of lessons from what was going on in Russia, you know, what was going on around the world. And they were like, we don't like what's happening here. And so you had movement leaders, they met with FDR, and they said, look, this is where it stands. If you don't do something, you might have that on your hands. And FDR made the decision to tell the banks and tell the big capitalists that we're going to do the New Deal. And he said, if you don't like it, we're not going to have a country anymore. You're not going to have any power. And then, you know, that is obviously like a really boiled down version of that story. But I mean, it's essentially what happened. And a lot of people forget that. But the reality is we don't have, and I mean, this is the Party for Socialism and Liberation's main line, is we don't have there's not time, there's not a future in store for a kinder capitalism, a New Deal. There's no space for like just thinking we can reform this system if we don't move past like the profit motive, and we don't move into a system where like the goods and the value that society creates aren't democratically just decided upon by the people, rather than that small 10% of people in the world. We're not going to have a future, because like the profit motive requires war. It requires endless expansion. If you don't, the rule of capitalism is you don't expand, you die.
Yeah, and if you don't exploit, you don't succeed. It's all built upon leveraging. You know, you don't start a business to run a business. You start a business to sell a business.
Exactly.
It's not about hard work, and never has been. It's about getting those people to work hard so you can take a nickel out of everybody's dollar, and then make it a dime, and then make it a quarter.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
I mean, look at inflation right now. I mean, for every dollar of inflation, 54 cents of that dollar is just corporate profits. And they're telling us the problem is because of people wanting more money. That people,
absurd.
yeah, it's the problem is the unions, the raises of wages, and the main thing that they say is we gave people too much stuff during COVID, which is just such a laugh. It's so funny.
$600 that we stretched over, a couple of years, or no, that really wasn't it.
Yeah, we had in the global north, we had the worst response to COVID imaginable. 1 million people are dead, and the effects on the economy from that are massive.
If anybody else did this to us, there'd be hell to pay.
Yeah.
If this was done to us by some organization, somebody would be crying about the number of American deaths and why we need to go bomb that country.
Well, I mean, arguably, they're trying to push that line, they're trying to blame China. Trump certainly did, and that's just because the U.S. foreign policy is, great power conflict with China, because the U.S. empire can't tolerate the emergence of a powerful China in a multipolar world. We are a unipolar hegemon, and all of our power, you hear libertarians talk about this all the time. They'll say, oh, well, the dollar has no real value. It's a fiat currency, which is dumb, because of course it has value. And money is simply like a universal commodity. It is the exchange form in itself. It's not a use value. You can't use money for really anything except for exchange.
But it works great, and it's the only thing that works. Like if you need to put yourself up for the night, or get a meal,
Yeah.
or get medical services or whatever. There's nothing else to bargain with at this point. We don't bring chickens and livestock, or
But what
beans
gives
or-
the oh yeah, exactly. I mean, well, whatever is relatively useful, or relatively hard to make into money, whatever form it takes, whether it's cowrie shells or gold.
Yeah.
What gives our money today power is the value of the state, the foreign debt, the power of the U.S. military, the petrodollar, but all of that's falling away. And so, just to circle back around to the apathy that I think people feel, I think that will fall away as consequences become real in this country for people that it hasn't been real. Now, that's not to say that consequences haven't been real for many, many people in this country. You know, the black population, the indigenous population, women,
There
LGBTQ
have certainly
people.
been, consequences and people who feel the effects of
Yeah.
this, yeah.
You know, if you talk to black and indigenous and immigrant, people from South America who immigrate here, I mean, they essentially live in a war zone. We practice forced sterilization concentration camps on our border, which our Maggie Hassan supports, like continuing our policies and funding ICE more, so, the broader point being made here is that, like, as that reality of the brutality of capitalism and empire becomes more of an in-your-face thing, and you're not able to isolate yourself from it, the more people are going to want answers. And I mean, that's why fascism is reemerging, is because it provides very simple answers that people don't have to think hard to understand, and it also really feeds into whatever, reactionary ideas already exist within a society. And that's the trouble with leftism, is that we actually have to explain the world around us to people, and, it takes time. People don't necessarily understand what we're talking about.
It's not always a lovely explanation. It's not always a real palatable thing. The conversations we have to have are difficult ones. We piss off our friends, we piss off our neighbors and the people in the power that we wish would come and listen and help us. It's a tough nut to crack to really talk about any of this stuff.
For sure. I would like to kind of go back, though, to just the housing issue. And, like, now that we've taken a bit of a bird's eye view, let's zoom back in to, this area.
Sure.
We're seeing utility rates are skyrocketing next month.
I think that's going to break something pretty serious. I don't think people are understanding what's about to happen and how the people who are close to the wire, what's going to happen to them directly, immediately.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. And I wrote an article about it for Liberation News, which you can find on the website if you go to liberationnews.org and just look up Chris Sununu on the search bar, because it's a couple weeks old now and the site updates pretty regularly. But yeah, I mean, it's basically like our politicians in this state are bought and paid for by companies like Eversource. Our politicians put our utilities commission is hand selected by the governor, and they're all people that are Eversource approved. So it's a clear case of our government protecting corporate profits when really, like, they should be required to eat the cost, and so the consumer doesn't have to subsidize what they're saying is unavoidable consequences from the war in Ukraine and climate catastrophe and supply chain issues. But, like, again, thinking about, so you got the 75% or the 112% increase in utility prices. You've got raising rents regularly. I mean, just in the last 3 months, I've heard from several people just doing the free store, oh, my rent went up $400. My rent went up $700. So you've got more people being evicted. You've got an eviction, all the money for rent assistance is running out. I believe also it's either next month or it's November. I believe it's November.
And at the same time, you have people making laws against people cohabitating and then trying to find the ways to, people are pretty resourceful. Like people could actually, get by all right, except that they really build the law to force us basically into, oh, no, if you're a little family of any size, shape, or description, you must pay an electric bill, you must pay a mortgage, you must pay the water bill. They like it really is, I mean, it's so close to slavery, it's just not even,
Yeah, well, I could go on about that, but I do want to cover some more topics here. But yeah, my thoughts are, in this community, we have to be doing our best to support our unhoused community, our impoverished community, because, like you said earlier, like, we're only 2 paychecks away from losing that, and especially if unemployment's going to be going up, and people are going to be losing jobs. like, that creates a pretty stark picture, especially in a state with such negligible resources. So
it's
that's
gonna
why
be-
we gotta be organizing together now and not relying on, our city councilors, despite some of them being very good people that are trying to work on this. But it's not about good or bad people, it's about, like, what does the system do,
Yeah.
so.
Should we, maybe that's a good way to take a turn here and maybe talk about, there's some political things going on here, and it's the good or bad people in government that seem to be, most of the problem in my mind is just somehow we've become accustomed to the idea that people who are nothing like us maybe should represent us because, well, they know the game pretty well. Or they're rich, they've got experience doing this, whatever, maybe they're powerful, maybe they just are very popular in town. I don't know, we've been for a long time, sort of at the mercy of people who don't seem very much like us, and we have, the primaries are creeping up. Everybody's talking about this stuff right now, who do we want to have in office and what's going on? And I'd be curious to hear from you, because I don't think you're in all the groups that I'm hearing knocking this stuff around. What's the word on the street? Who's running? What's going on? Who's being effective? What are you hearing? What are you seeing going on?
You mean from beside people that I know that are running?
Yeah, I guess. I guess what do you think is the general vibe of what's going on, regardless of who's running? It seems to me that it should be impossible for the Republicans to even, tread water at this point with what they just let go on with Trump and the insurrection and all, like this catastrophe. But they're doing all right. Like, people aren't too upset about that. You're either wholly upset or you're just letting it ride. So, we got Republicans just doing their own thing. That doesn't seem to be on a state level. People don't seem to maybe see it as that black and white or that red and blue. But also we have a whole bunch of progressives running as Democrats in the Democratic Party. There is only one party as far as I'm concerned. The Republicans have just jumped the shark, and I think they're doing their own little thing. But a lot of the problems that we have are a result of the Democrats not being as effective as they could when they get the chance to act like the power. They sort of say, hey, well, we want to work across the aisle. So, a lot of people are upset about that, and a lot of progressive folks are trying to push over the folks who have been just in the way and in their seats too long, and there's a little blowback about that. So I wonder if any of that hits the street. Like, do people know what's going on within the Democratic Party locally? And I guess we take that nationally too, if you think. But
I would say, like, in general, the word on the street isn't. Like, there's not. People don't know about who's running for local office. A handful of people do, and the ones that do is because, like, those people go out and actually talk to people. But, like, your common person on the street, like your common working class person, because earlier you said, one thing that I want to stick on, you said people, they don't seem much like us, and I want to kind of problematize that and say, like, well, why don't they seem like us? And, the answer is their class interest. What are their interests? And the fact is that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both there to serve people who own private property. They're not there to serve the working class, students, renters, all of which are in the working class. They're not there to protect our rights or hear from us at all, and you get this amazing contempt from both parties. I want to cite Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables comment. But to go back to, like, local, it's like, I would just challenge anyone running for Democratic candidate right now to go around Keene or wherever they are, go into every single business and ask people there if they know who's running, or if they know even what ward they're in. And let them be shocked at the amount of people who do not know, and fundamentally do not care. And I think there's this thing too, that like when I've heard a lot, and this is where the contempt comes out, and especially amongst Democrats, is, oh, these working class schlubs, they just, because they have this picture of like the working class as like this guy with a lunch pail and a hard hat. And it's like, no, it's also like the trans teen that works at your local bagel shop. They don't care because you don't represent their interests. But they're not interested in hearing why people don't care. They're only interested in kind of like shunning people for not caring. And at best, what I've seen, I mean, and I don't want to, I'm not going to name names, but I heard a candidate say, I asked them why, or how have they been approaching people who aren't traditional voters? And they seemed disinterested. And I was like, well, don't you think that it's important, especially in a county which has like, I think maybe 10% voter turnout? Don't you think in a race that could be won by 100 votes, like getting 100 people who don't tend to vote for you would make a difference? And their response was, well, I'd rather get people who do vote to vote. And so to me, I see a lot of the progressives as they're trying to play they're trying to achieve their more progressive agenda. I think it's by any standard of like a European government, it's pretty center left, or if not entirely centrist policies. But like they're trying to make change, but they're going by the same playbook. They're trying to appeal to the same donors that all of these establishment centrists have. And really at this point, the centrists are reactionaries. They're trying to go back to a pre-COVID time that doesn't exist, and that puts them in a very similar boat ideologically to the thinking of far-right people. It's just not as extreme in its violence, but I guess it's not overt in its violence. I mean, the status quo that we had could only exist with unthinkable violence. It was just, again, like we talked about, hidden. So, I really would say, like, the word on the street is, like, get out there. Get on the street. If you're interested in running and you're trying to win, like, why aren't you talking to people?
Talk to us. Come talk to us.
And I mean, and that's really, again, like, what the Party for Socialism and Liberation really is working towards is building a mass organization, like a mass organization of workers, students, movement veterans, like immigrants, people from all sectors of class, race, gender, and all backgrounds who understand this oppression and want to build a movement to change it. And not just like vote in the right people, but actually fundamentally change the base organization of society. So make sure that, there aren't people that are just simply taking what we all earn or what we all collectively make, that we're socially organized to make, but privately taken for profit. We want to change that so that it's, socially owned and socially produced. And the only way that we're ever going to win any of that stuff, and you look at history, is through collective power. That, while we're not relying on these politicians to make these changes for us, but rather deciding we're going to make these changes. And a great example is the original fight for reproductive rights. I mean, Roe v. Wade was won, not because some politicians signed some papers and it was done. I mean, that was the culmination, but it was because millions of people for decades were organizing in all sorts of ways. Some of them less mentionable on live TV than others. But the fact was that the movement was fighting in a time with, like, a very dark time. And they won it under a more conservative court with Richard Nixon as president. So if we think that there's no point in protesting. There's no point in getting involved. If we're angry, but we're despondent because the Dems aren't going to do anything, we don't need them to do anything. There's more of us than there are them. We just got to believe in an organization of people, you know. And I encourage people to join PSL, but really, it's just anything, you know, get
Get out
involved in a
there.
radical organization and start making change. But like all of this kind of backwards talk about, well, you know, I mean, I had a person in Manchester tell me yesterday that the standard, you hear it all the time, but, well, if you don't vote, which I do, by the way, I always vote in local, school
Good,
board, and any
good,
time I
good.
can, I vote, and I almost always vote blue. The only time I didn't was Mayor Hansel, and I regret that decision. But, you know,
But
I
he
don't,
wasn't blue then, he was still, you know, he was still nonpartisan. Meh.
yeah, and I was still a bit more liberal then.
And that was a tough one, actually, just to jump on that, because that actually was a fun race in a couple of ways. Mitch Greenwald, when I heard he was a Democrat, I said, really? And, you know, he owns most of Keene. He is
Yeah.
the landlord we're all like struggling against. He is
Yeah.
like, wow. And then you got George, who's kind of this hip young guy. You know, he's got some charisma. He's like, you know, we need youth. I'll tell you that all day long. He just looked like a really good guy, and he was the Republican. And I was like, oh, and of course, I did not buy any of this nonpartisan crap at all. But that got said a lot, and then he did some things that, were very, very Republican. You know, he dismantled, you know, Cheshire TV was the one that
Oh, yeah.
really touched me. But you know, he was kind of getting his ducks in a row, like a good Republican does, and given the opportunity to speak truth to power, like we were always after the council and the mayor to write and send stuff to Concord. You know, how about our rooms and meals tax? You know, help us out with these bills and this and that. And he and the council have always just rejected the idea that they should ever, you know, go say anything to Concord. Oh, keep everything local. And that just seems to have been such a scam, because now he's running for Congress, and
yeah.
you know, he's Chris Sununu himself kicked him off down at the down at the watering hole there, and
Which
you
it
know,
should come as no surprise to anyone, by the way.
no, absolutely not. And I don't know, just what a scam that was. And you know, we need to remember that all politics is local, and all of it goes all the way up to the top. And there is no such thing as nonpartisan. There just isn't, until somebody comes out and says, I'm a straight up independent or Green Party or something. Nah, they're in one of those camps, and they're gonna do the things that the people in those camps do,
Yeah.
if you let it in.
You know, I think really where you see what could be called nonpartisan or bipartisan work, where you see that, that's where you see the real face of U.S. imperialism. Because where are those places? It's always police budgets, it's always military funding, it's always cutting like social services, it's always these things. I mean, Democrats are less prone to do that, but you know, like on all the points where you see them work together, that's where you know that is the true face of empire. But you know, I think just to cycle back to Hansel, you know, I think there is a lesson in there for our progressive candidates. You know, because like as personally and as part of the PSL, like we believe in supporting candidates who are actually fighting and doing good work. And I know many of the people in this community that are running are trying to do good work, and I support what they're doing. And so, you know, I want to say that this isn't a polemic against them. And like, I really hope that there's some lessons to be drawn from hearing just a working class person. I deliver pizza, you know, like I'm not a paid organizer. I literally work driving pizza around the town, and therefore I see a lot of the town. But like, if you look at Hansel's campaign, I mean, he had it was like the most youth turnout in New Hampshire, I think, in that year, and I think it may be in history.
Yeah.
And again, these were tight races, but there's there was a thing that he did that I think that our progressive candidates can draw from. And I mean, but do it in a more genuine way of actually going to people. Ask what they want. Don't tell them what you're going to do. Ask what they want, and then formulate a plan from there. And then present it back to people and say, like, this is what we're trying to do.
I really think that the best thing any candidate can do is talk to the people and ask them what they want, and talk to them in real ways. No, not a press conference where you state a few things and take 3 questions and then run away, but like sit and talk to people, have these conversations. It's important to, if you're genuine, if you're sincere in wanting to be for the people, get their true support, you're not going to just deliver them material, you're going to engage and find out what people really want and need.
And I'll put it this way, politicians do it all the time, but they just do it with money. They do it with donors, they do it with business people, they do it with super PACs and, think tanks. That's who they meet with behind closed doors to ask them, what do you want us to do? And they take them seriously because they'll pay that person's campaign and, like their Sunday brunch. And I think it's very, very disingenuous to think that we can't be doing this. And I'm not saying that like our progressives are doing that specifically, but I see them picking up a lot of the playbook that has been passing around in these bourgeois circles, and it's not going to help them to appeal to people that their message would appeal to. So I think that's important to think about. And, again, I think really what people on the street feel is that there's no one that cares. They've just got to work. They've just got to pay their rent. And they don't have the time to think about politics, much less try to get organized. And that's one of the biggest challenges of being like, a socialist organizer, is trying to break through that wall of like, there is something you can do. The more of us there are, the more that we can do, the more action that we can take, the more effective that we can be, the more engaged in learning what people actually are thinking and how we can make a plan to build on that, the more that we can do. But like, when people are working 40 hours a week, when they are single mothers of, multiple children.
Oh, yeah, you're tired. You don't have a lot of energy left for fighting the fight, for the extracurricular stuff, for the stuff that doesn't really bring home something sort of immediately tangible for the family. It's really hard to find that time. And one of the things actually that I see is, talking about the Dems and our progressives sort of doing the same playbook. They're trying to use the same playbook. They're trying to play nice within the Democratic Party. They're trying to do the things that they've seen others do to succeed. But what they're missing is the robust support and the old knowledge. The people who are playing the proper game within the Democratic Party, which I'm going to argue are some of the problems. Mm-hmm. They have people helping them out. They have people helping them with strategy. They have people helping them with fundraising, with messaging, with all of this stuff. And what happened here in Keene, when our progressives charged the Cheshire County Democratic Party and basically went in and swept it.
Yeah, I was part of that. I helped, I was one of those people on that call.
Yeah, and the Dems were, well, exactly, they had that Zoom call, right? They were going to vote, and they had, our progressive candidates had said, hey, I want you to, you guys make sure you make this a great big meeting, right? Because we all have all our friends coming. Make sure this is a big Zoom meeting. You've paid the fee. And they kind of, when that meeting happened, the first thing that happened was the room filled to capacity and everybody screamed and complained. And the big Dems said, we're really so sorry. And they had to cancel the meeting and then send out stuff to everybody and reschedule and re-invite everybody to a bigger meeting after some.
It was horrendous. I've never seen something quite like that.
It was like, oops, you say oops before you drop it. Like, it was fake. But it's so maddening and saddening to see these folks who really want to make this change happen, just thwarted by the bigger party, and we're having that problem right now. So again, they're not getting the support, and when we were canvassing, last year, I was watching the Dems and RAD and these Dems and those Dems struggle with who they were allowed to cooperate with and who was going to help each other out in the streets. And so there's not been a lot of camaraderie between these two groups who are pretty well on the same side. But it's been going on still. There's a lot of action behind the scenes against our progressive candidates. And a lot of that is pretty subtle, but it's subtle because those folks are good at it. They've been doing that for a long time, and they can send a signal, just send a signal, and that gets seen and heard, and they're showing the party that they have support for the party, and they're showing the money that they're going to keep doing that work. And it's been very, very hard for our guys to get in on that. Right down to, we have progressive, like right now there's this big Facebook fight going on, which is funny. But we have established members of the Democratic Party who are running, and their supporters and people who work in groups to help the Dems just come right out and say, well, we don't want anything to do with the Cheshire County Dems anymore. Yeah, we're done with them. We've had it. That's not real. The Democrats moved on, started their own little group, and it's still going on. There are still people right now who they are calling the endorsers of our progressive candidates. They're calling these people who endorsed our candidates to demand why. They are shutting off their own friends. They are shutting off friends and relationships and defriending people. And if you've supported one of our progressive candidates, there are people who are letting you know right now that that's not okay. And I don't know, it's saddening and maddening to me. We know we don't like each other all that much. We're in the same boat, we're in the same camp. We know that the progressives came to shake things up a little bit. They don't want to just follow in the normal order and let things happen as they have been happening. Business as usual is not good, and they're being beat up for it. But of course, that is the game, and then that's what happens, making change. People don't love being unseated. People don't love being opposed. But
no, they fight it tooth and nail.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. It's been maddening, and what I feel lately is just that our progressives are not getting that story out. There's great conversations happening in our groups. They talk a lot about it in the meetings. They have Zooms where they all participate and do all the stuff. But again, I come back to the person on the street who doesn't know much, and really where the biggest voices are and where the best coverage is. That really is the word that stands. And they're talking about that right now today. It's like, boy, everybody's saying, poor Paul, why are those guys being so mean to Paul Birch? And there is definitely a story as to why. I don't see our folks responding very well to that, but I could go on and on about that. Are you getting any of that? Do you? You've probably tuned into some of that Facebook back and forth. What is your, as an observer, you might be maybe a step further back than me for a little bit more clarity. What do you see in all of that?
It's just all so out of touch. Just going back to what we were just talking about, is that it speaks to a real disconnect with the on-the-ground lives of the working class people. Of people who work in hospitals, who work in restaurants, who rent, who are single parents, who are incarcerated, who are unhoused, who are facing can't walk down the street without fear for their life as a trans teenager, because of how hostile this community is to trans people. They don't, I'm gonna swear, they don't fucking get it. Like, and that's the thing, and I know that some of the people that run do get it, but like the problem isn't that like they're not like they don't care. It's that like this fight on these online fights are out of context. The people don't see it, and I think, like you said, it kind of like just they're not the progressive side of this isn't really doing enough to actually like bring the guts out to the people. You know, like Bernie Sanders could have done that. I mean, the Democratic Party sank him twice, very intentionally. They didn't want a radical left option for the people. They've spent money making sure that Trump would win the Republican primary because they thought he'd be a weak candidate. I mean, they set the bait and hook for fascism to start really popping off in this country, and they want to blame progressives, and you're going to see it in November when the Democrats lose, because they're going to. Like, I mean, you might see some wins here and some wins there, and it might not be a complete blowout, but they're going to lose power, and you're going to see an immediate backlash from the Democratic Party towards the radical left. Groups like the groups like the PSL, groups like DSA. I mean, they got widely criticized for their stance on like a very, very mild statement about the war in Ukraine and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't just be like dumping a bunch of weapons in there, and maybe we do have a part to play in this because of NATO. They were eviscerated by the media and the political establishment. And so there's this opportunity here for them to actually connect with the people, but they won't do it because of decorum and this kind of unprincipled peace, which it seems like liberalism sort of hinges on, is, well, I disagree with what you say, but I'd fight to the death to defend your right to say it. And it creates this political atmosphere where nobody says what they mean. Nobody actually does anything with the intention of just doing it, but rather as part of this political game, which is, again, detached from the daily lives of people. And that's why you get this despondency of people who don't care. They don't understand their relation to the state. You get a lot of people, I mean, again, the libertarians who they think the problem is big government and we just need to let the free market sort it out. And I'm like, I'm sorry, y'all, like, the government is at the service of capital. Like, the state as a form has only ever existed in the service of whatever class controls the surplus value, the surplus product that society creates. So if it's a slave-based society, the state functions to make sure that the people who own slaves get to take what slaves make and use it for their purposes. In feudal societies, you make sure that that the kings are able, and the landlords, they're able to take the surplus that the peasants and the serfs make and use it for their purposes. In capital, it's the same thing. That is what the state does. That is what the function of it is. And the premise of socialism is that the working class is, the state is in service of the working class. It's not a utopia. It's simply a different way of organizing production in society, and it eliminates the need for us to have these profit schemes and ever endless expansion on a very finite world. And I think,
endless expansion. Yeah. We'll just keep growing
Yeah.
as long as there's growth and.
Yeah, we're going to go to the
we know
moon.
that
We're going to go to
that's
Mars.
mathematically- Yeah, there is an end. There's a finite to everything.
Yes, exactly. And so to that, I think I would really like to see our progressive candidates, even though I don't expect them to take up the red flag and start, fighting for socialism. I do hope that they're able to sort of like remove themselves from this political game being played and realize that they can win a lot more support by actually appealing to people. Because, I mean, and I'll give you a great example of one group that's doing it and being very effective. They're called fascists. It's called the right wing. They're doing it. Trump did it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, all these people, they're doing it. They have a mass base of support. The people believe that they are fighting for them. Christian fascists believe that, and this isn't a small, just like, oh, they're just the, no, this is a large amount of people in the country. It's not the majority, but they are a large amount of people, and they are a mass movement because they're, what they think is going to help them is being appealed to, and no one is there to like fight their more reactionary tendencies. They're just fueling them to gain power. And meanwhile, the Democrats seem like they're just, we're just gonna, hey, Mr. Local business owner, like, give us more money like you did that guy. Oh no, I'm a little bit too radical. What will I ever do? It's like the answer's in front of you, and it is the mass of people who want change desperately, but can't just like, I mean, half of them can't make time to vote in the first place. So it's like,
Yeah, and like not participating is just, it's just, oh my goodness. I'll tell you, I don't think that the Dems are gonna come out in favor of socialism this time around. I think they're on thin ice, and they don't, they probably won't wave that flag. And I don't think that our progressives, who might take a sip of the tea once in a while, I don't think they're gonna say boo about anything like that. I think they're gonna try to prove that they're good Democrats, which only, once again, works for the folks who are already your Democrats. So they're trying to be nice, and they're trying to, win on their issues, but they're not really getting out, they're not getting their issues out effectively. And the problem really is that simple, short and simple sells. Donald Trump was a simpleton. And he came out and he said, hey, there's Mexicans at the border, we gotta do something, we gotta protect our country. Like, he gave them just really simple things to grasp that were wrong but easy, and that works every time. He grabbed the stage, grabbed the megaphone. Hitler did it. He just said, hey, watch this. I'm gonna, these people, if you tell them to buy Tide, they're gonna buy Tide if you tell them enough. Tell them to buy Coke, they're gonna buy Coke. If you tell them enough, and if I tell you that your country's under attack and you gotta get behind me, otherwise you get all this complex stuff. You get trans people, you get homeless people who deserve our help and care. You get all these issues that are like, oh, it's not black and white, and there's a million sides to it, and it's very confusing. It's super easy to throw up your hands in frustration, grab the easy message, and run with it.
yeah.
And those guys are loud and consistent, and you gotta either drown that out or have a much, much better plan to.
Yeah, you got to organize and fight back,
Yeah.
because they're here. We have NSC 131. We've got Patriot Front. We've got a multitude of fascist groups. And I don't mean just like Republicans. I mean like legit Nazis that they're organizing. And so it's not like people in this state aren't. We are. And again, I encourage people to get into a party like PSL, or get into whatever fits their current ideological framework. But if we don't do something about that, they're gonna keep growing, and they've been growing quite rapidly recently. And I think it's also a mistake. I see this on when I bring this up to Democrats. There's this kind of whatever, they're idiots, and it's like, well, yeah, but it doesn't do to underestimate your enemy. That's how they'll get you, because while their ideology may be absolutely repugnant and unthinkably violent, that doesn't mean that they can't strategize, that they can't think, and that they can't win. Because we've seen in history they do over and over again. Especially when things become unstable enough. I mean, Lenin said fascism is capitalism in decay, and that it is proven to be true. As things become more unstable, and a fascist movement presents itself in contradiction to the left, the existing ruling class will support that fascist group over a left group that wants to take what they have and use it for everyone's common good. So it's quite serious. I mean, we really do have to take this historical moment seriously for so many reasons. And I think that's one of the reasons why people get despondent, is because there's so much. it's so big, and how could I, a small person, do anything about it? And the answer is you can't. You, as a small person doing stuff by yourself, you can't do anything. The point is, as a group, as a collective, you are power magnified over 100-fold. I mean, it's really, we have to break out of this thinking that's so tied to our bootstraps ideology. Like, take your bootstraps, rip them off, throw them in a field. I don't care. We don't need bootstraps anymore. We've got enough shoes to fill the ocean. You know, like, we don't need any more shoes. We don't need any more bootstraps. What we need is people working together, understanding that, you know, what affects people halfway across the world affects our community as well. Because that's, you said this earlier, you know, like our focus on our community. And I think it's so important that when we're organizing, we're not just thinking about, and not even just organizing, but just politics, shopping, whatever, you know, having friends in a community. We're not just thinking about it in these little terms of our town, you know, our little space. It's like, you know, like the climate affects everyone. Imperialism affects everyone. Racism affects everyone. And the decisions of, you know, something like Nancy Pelosi going to visit Taiwan, I mean, that's extremely dangerous. And it can affect things in this community. And we need to get that straight very quickly, or else, you know, like the consequences are extremely dire, like I said. So
I think you're right. I guess I've felt this way before, but I really think, you know, if we don't really get a grip on things and start doing something right now, real soon, we're going to be in a heck of a lot of trouble. Hey, we've spent quite a while kicking things around like this. I wonder if there's anything we might have missed. I think we ought to wrap up, but I'd like to be sure that we've touched on everything that you know, if there's anything we missed from your list, and I'd also like you to let folks know how they can get involved with you and your organizations. Yeah, well, what do you think is, you know, have we missed anything here that you wanted to hit on?
well, I will say that we didn't get a lot of time to talk about the struggle for abortion rights, but I do want to say that, you know, there are people organizing. There's organizations like the Reproductive Freedom Fund of New Hampshire. If you're not following and supporting them, please do. They do incredible work in the state and provide access to people who cannot afford abortion services, both within the state and people who are now fleeing from other states to receive services. So it's extremely important work. Again, it's in the field of mutual aid, which is an important piece of, you know, leftist thinking of how a better world can look. And so we need to support work like that. And to that point also, I do want to bring up some of the things that right now our federal government and state government can do to make sure that abortion rights are protected. You know, so like on the federal level, Biden could open abortion clinics on federal lands and military hospitals. He could declare a national public health emergency. He could prepare the Justice Department to fight states' attempts to criminalize travel for abortions. He could grant federal employees paid leaves of absence to travel to other states for abortions. He could call for the Senate to abolish the filibuster. He could create a federal education campaign on medical abortions such as pills, and he could call for the Supreme Court to be expanded. All of this could be done right now. He won't do it, not without a mass movement of people. If you have millions of people in the streets, if you have people shutting down industry, they will move, and they have in the past. Now, on the state level, the things that we could call for and could be done right now is to legalize abortion at all stages of pregnancy in the New Hampshire State Constitution. No mention of viability or use of language, and it would use language of women and pregnant people. We could repeal the parental consent law. That should be thrown out immediately. We could mandate state medical coverage. We could restore state funding to clinics that provide abortion. We could restore buffer zones and increase the buffer to 50 feet. We could refuse to cooperate with out-of-state officials seeking to prosecute those seeking abortions in the state, which Sununu has remained squirmy on, to say the least. These are all things that our state could do right now, and again, it would take the pressure from organized people's movements. But if there's any legislative officials that or candidates that do listen to this, I hope you take this to heart and push for this in your campaign platforms. So if you'd like to get involved with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, specifically our Southern New Hampshire branch, because we are a national party, this isn't just in New Hampshire, but there are branches across the country that engage in all sorts of works. We see all points of struggle, whether it's the struggle for housing, the struggle for healthcare, the struggle for immigrant justice, for reproductive services, the struggle against imperialism, the struggle for unions. These are all part of the same struggle, and that's the struggle for socialism. And so the PSL exists, like I said, with branches across the country. In New Hampshire, we exist across the swath of southern New Hampshire. And if you'd like to get involved, you can find us at pslweb.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under the same. If you want to find our branch specifically, you can look up the Party for Socialism and Liberation, Southern NH or SNH on all of those platforms. And I'm sure Dave can provide a link in the, in the video at some point, after editing. And then if you would like to attend a mutual aid group, you can get in contact with the Mutual Aid Relief Fund of New Hampshire. And if you're local to Keene and want to check out our free store, then you can come down on Saturday from 2 to 3:30. We're always there at Railroad Square, right next to Local Burger. So thank you for having me, Dave.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show and giving us all that information. I feel like we could probably talk another hour or two and still leave stones unturned in all of this. There's so much to talk about. I do hope you'll join me soon. I think we can, I've been trying to get this show to happen sort of regularly. I think we could do a lot more to have conversations like this and to run this show and to involve members of the community. I can simply open a door. I can do this in a Zoom meeting and have people join us from anywhere. They don't have to show up here in person. And I'm going to hope to do a lot more of that in the future. But I appreciate you coming down and taking your time and telling us a little bit about you and what you do. And I genuinely appreciate your concern for the people of Keene, for the people of New Hampshire, really the people everywhere, and doing the good work you do. Undoubtedly, you or I or somebody will catch a bunch of flack for, socialism, like people have been
I'm used to
trained
it.
and triggered, it's like you can just, they salivate when they hear that stuff.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I have no animosity or fear or reluctance or anything regarding socialists. I think we should all be scared to death of Nazis and fascists and the people who will absolutely just walk on you and keep you down.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of threats out there. You folks certainly aren't one of them. And the other piece I think I'd like to bring up is that just together we can win and we can do all this. Like we were talking about unity, we're talking about people in numbers, and we do that pretty well in small groups. Mm-hmm. The reproductive rights folks are standing up. The LGBTQ folks are standing up. The environment people are standing up. There's a whole bunch of folks who get together and do good work. And I just really urge all of you people to support each other together and understand that your fight is the same fight. You've got your own beef, but it's the us against them, and together we win. How could they alienate all? How could they do this to all of our women? Throw shade at minorities, throw shade at the religions they don't like. How can they just be off-putting to everybody all at once and come out ahead? And the answer is because we don't hear it when it's about them. We don't hear it when it's about them. We're deeply offended when it's about us, and we don't have people coming to help us out. We should all be helping each other out. So I think
Absolutely.
if I could step down off my soapbox there and say,
It's a good soapbox.
That's what I had for you. So yeah, come together, come out in the streets, help us be heard, and we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think we're probably good. Are you gonna? Should we just say good night?
Yeah.
I think
Solidarity.
that's it, man. Yeah, right on. Have a good night, folks. If I ran the closer.